What you want to know? Let's see if I ask a few questions about your past on workplaces.
Okay.
So the first question, did you have any job, or perhaps your parents did at the time?
What time was that?
From 1945 to 1975.
Okay. Of course, both my parents worked. My mother had a minimum wage job in a textile mill, and my father was an electrician, so they were both hourly wage earners. I started work when I was 15 at Hardee's, my first job, and later on I found out that a lot of the work I was doing was illegal because they had me working late at night, and they weren't supposed to do that, so they were kind of taking advantage of me as a 15-year-old, but I was happy to make the money. So.
Okay. Second question, how are they or you treated at the workplace?
Well, I'll just mention one thing. In the preliminary discussions with you guys, I can't say that I was discriminated against. You got to understand, I'm a white man in the South, so we were kind of top of the heap, if you want to say that. Although I would not have known that at the time. So I think I was always, except for being worked illegally there for a little bit, I thought I was always treated fairly. I always had, I worked from age 15 on. I always had little minimum wage jobs. I worked textile mill a couple of summers, and there, since that was a bigger organization, they had human resource rules and regulations that controlled things, and I was always treated fairly according to the rules at the time. So that I would say, but it was a hard workplace. It was a tough place to be, especially when you were young. I was 18. You had to be 18 to work at textile mills.
Okay. What were some of the things that you saw from not only your coworkers but also the customers?
Can you explain that a little further? What kind of things are you looking for?
Did you see anything like were your coworkers or customers discriminated in any way? Were they discriminating you or anything around that?
Well, again, being a white man in the South, it didn't happen to me. But I'm sure it happened to others at the time. Generally, the workplace I was in was primarily white. And I don't know if that was by design, law, or what, but you got to remember that I was working in the late 60s, early 70s, and that's when the civil rights movement was just rolling, and as a matter of fact, I was in the first integrated class to graduate from high school in my town. I had never known an African American until I was in the 6th grade when we integrated their 2 students. I didn't think much about it at the time, but in reflection back, I didn't know any black people when I was young. Now in high school, we were fully integrated, and it was fine. Workplace, though, was probably not so much. I do remember working, for a while I quit teaching and worked in a business, and it was an office machine business. They basically sell copiers and office furniture and this kind of stuff, and it was interesting. I did notice this: the front of the building where all the sales and stuff went on, that's where all the white folk worked, and in the back where all the heavy lifting and work got done was all African American. It was interesting to see that difference in the workplace. My guess is it wasn't intentional, but I do think a lot of discrimination is not intentional. I think it's just kind of the way it was, and people didn't think to change anything.
Did the employees all get paid the same? How was the pay wage decided?
Well, again, when I worked in the textile mills, in fact, all my life I've worked at places pretty much that, if you had this position, this is what you got paid. I do remember one year when I was in college, I was working the mills in the summer. I was working the same textile mill as my mother, but I was working 3rd shift, and I made a nickel more an hour than she did. I made $2.37 an hour. She made $2.32. And when I reflect back on that, I think how sad that was. My mother was middle-aged at the time, and worked all her life was just making pittance, And but no, all the jobs I had, the wages were set by a standard. Didn't matter man, woman, black, white. That's what you made. So and I'm sure that there were discriminatory practices, but I wouldn't witness to them.
Okay. Have you ever wanted to run for an office job?
Sometimes I think so, but no, I don't believe I can stand the criticism.
Did you ever feel like standing up to protest?
Well, yeah, again, I was of the Vietnam era, and there were a lot of protests, and people were anti-war. There's also, we were coming out of as I said before, the civil rights movements. There were lots of protests, but I was never really involved in anything serious like that. And maybe I was naive, but again, I was fortunate in the world in which I was living. It wasn't affecting me. Well, until my year of my draft, and my draft number came out 237, so I didn't worry about it too much.
What was your biggest fear at the time, or if it is still your fear?
In terms of what?
Anything when you were in the workplace, anything that you could have been scared about for yourself. So if you were in the workplace, if you had a coworker that you believed hated you or didn't really care for you, you're scared that he might have or she might have done something.
No, I never really had much trouble with that. I did have an incident at one time in a textile mill. There was a fellow there from New York, and he was, again, this is back in the 70s before there's much of this kind of talk around, but he was talking how tough he was being from New York City, and and I kind of called him on it, and I found out he was pretty tough. So I didn't say anything else to that guy after that. Now that I'm a semi-retired educator, my biggest fear is the politics of our state right now, and how they may affect me in my retirement versus how I may be actually treated in the workplace.
Okay. So last question: How do you think the past has affected your present life?
That's a good one. My wife and I talk about this a lot because we grew up in environments where we probably shouldn't be the people we are today. I think I've had a very unique life all the way through, especially just for a simple educator. As I said, I was in the very first class in my town to graduate that had an integrated class. And it was interesting the way they did it in my hometown. There was a white high school and a black high school. So what they did is and two junior high schools. So what they did is they built a new high school and closed the black high school, and then they merged kids. We didn't have, when I came through, there was no class above me. When I was in the ninth grade, the ninth grade was as high as we went. When I was in 10th grade, etc. And so we gradually filled that school, and we filled it with people from both the old white junior high school and the black junior high school. And we had to build the school, kind of like you guys are building the traditions and how things are done here. And it was a very unique experience. When I reflect back on it, I think it shaped me greatly. We have reunions, and we've had a couple recently. Everybody comes back, and there are a lot of high schools, especially if they were predominantly white high schools, the black kids don't come. But they all show at our reunion because we built that tradition together. And I think it was a unique experience. And so when I look at the world now, I think that shaped how I view it. People are people. And has nothing to do with anything else. Now you have your backgrounds and things that shape you, of course, but people are people. But I do believe that was probably the major thing that shaped my life, although I didn't realize it at the time.
Oh, that's really awesome. And I want to say thank you for spending your time to answer our questions.
Not a problem.